everyone. We're excited to speak today with Libby Buttenwieser from Headspace. She is a product marketing manager, and I'm really excited to hear from you, Libby. So I'm going to let you take it away, and we're all ears.
Thank you, Anne. It's great to be here with you and the rest of the closed community today to talk about how to use win-loss analyses to really influence a cross-functional strategy. So with that, I will share my screen and just use a couple slides as placeholders to kind of mark where we're at in the conversation. And first off, what I think I'll do is just set some context for everybody. So as Anne said, I'm the product marketing manager here at Headspace, but I specifically work on our B2B business, which is called Headspace for Work. And rather than the direct-to-consumer channel, which I think Headspace is best known for, we have an app. It focuses on mindfulness and meditation. It's been around for about 8 or so years now. And the main thing that the app is known for is you can go down to the App Store on Google or iOS, download it, pay a monthly or annual fee, and that's the direct-to-consumer channel. Now, about 4 years ago, Headspace for Work came into play, and what we do on my team is we take the Headspace app, we join it with a slew of administrative products and professional services, and we sell that as an employer benefit to mostly medium and large employers across the globe. So my role as product marketing manager is mainly twofold. When we launch new features and services to our buyers, who are typically folks in HR or benefits, I work quite closely with our product team to create the launch and continuous engagement optimization plans for those features. So that's everything from sales enablement, making sure communications assets and sales collateral are up to snuff. So I work closely again with our creative team there as well. And of course, the sales stakeholders. So we have anyone from a BDR, who's a pre-sales development person, through a post-sale partner success manager. They need to figure out how to talk about these solutions and how to actually sell them and maintain engagement among their customer or prospect base. The other part of my job is really, I would say, just defining how we show up in the market as a quote unquote product, right? So while we are, a mix of products and services, we're really an employee mental health solution as Headspace for Work. But when I started in this role about 1.5 to 2 years ago, there was no one way that we talked about ourselves in the market. So anything from, just core messaging docs to the general, one sales deck that the entire team uses, to our social channels that really didn't exist for B2B specifically. As product marketing manager, I like to say that I define how we talk about our solution and how we are positioned amongst the competitive set in the market. So it's almost brand marketing in a sense. And I think some of the challenges that you can see on the screen here, when I first joined and throughout that first year, was we hadn't really done that work as a team and as an organization to figure out exactly what core messages we want to get across and how we show up and where we're positioned. So as a highly cross-functional person on the team, one thing that I found difficult was in B2B sales, it can be tricky sometimes to validate assumptions because you need to get large sets of data, but it's coming from a lot of times just conversations. So instead of, a direct-to-consumer company where you can change a button or test a message and you actually can run a very controlled experiment, it's more difficult to do that with messaging if it's coming from humans during a sales conversation. So in addition to having a really cross-functional role where there are many stakeholders at play, as I just kind of described, between brand, sales, creative, product, the other thing was when I would have ideas or beliefs, it was tricky to really back those up. And we hadn't done full-scale win-loss analyses yet on the team. So one reason that we came to work with closed was that we really wanted to make sure that we were getting a wider swath of interviews and having them be standardized so that each quarter we know the drill and we can send out emails to every customer that we lost, that we won, and also those who churned in that given quarter. So that was a lot of information. That's how we came to work with closed. Now I'm going to move on to talking about how we use these closed interviews and the win-loss analyses that come from them to really influence not just the marketing roadmap, but pretty much every big team's roadmap that exists within our B2B function. So I'll mainly focus on sales and product for this. And then as well, of course, about how I influence kind of my own team's roadmap, given that there are several that don't just entail product marketing. So there are 4 tips that you can see on the screen here. The first, and I very much believe in this one, is to know your audience. And by audience, I mean, who is the internal audience with whom you're going to share the insights from your closed win-loss analyses. And it's important, I think, to really tailor the presentation of that information to the various stakeholders. So what I do when I'm going through my quarterly analysis is I create a synthesized deck, and I then bring sales, product, creative, strategy, and ops. I bring stakeholders from all of those teams into one meeting at the end of the quarter. I send the deck as a pre-read, and I use that time to really discuss the learnings with everyone. The second tip here is using a combination of data plus anecdotes. So while I think it's extremely important to have the closed transcripts in part of the deck, for instance, what I do is I will actually say, here's a big finding as the headline of a slide, and then I'll also take a quote or two that really matches that headline, and I'll put it right there on the slide so that everyone in the pre-read can get a good sense of the themes, the strengths, the weaknesses, things we should be working on, things we're doing amazingly, and then also hear from the customer's voice to set of, a good amount of empathy there. But where possible in your presentations or analyses, whether it's a doc or you're in a deck, add data from other sources. So one thing that we noticed about 4 or 5 months ago in our Q1 analysis was that our partners were surprised how long some of our procurement processes were taking. And so that was a big theme. The contracting process was a little bit too long for everyone's liking. And what I did to supplement that was go through Salesforce and pull data for how long each organization was actually in what we would call the procurement phase. And by showing numbers alongside these kind of anecdotes, I think it really got the message across to our sales, legal, and strategy teams. This was maybe something we should focus on. Next up, I have a tip called facilitate ideation. So like I mentioned, I always share the deck with our insights and learnings as a pre-read to our big meeting every quarter. And usually that meeting lasts about 60 minutes. And the way that I structure these meetings is typically give or take 20 minutes just to go through the deck, because of course we said it as a pre-read, but maybe not everyone has time to do so before. And pause for questions, clarify, add context where needed. But a large portion of that meeting is actually just dedicated to brainstorming and talking about ideas that we might have in a perfect world, no resource limitation. Like, what are some crazy cool things that we could do to address problems X, Y, and Z? And lastly, having very clear follow-up action items is super important. When you're bringing tons of different stakeholders in to talk about, a large array of topics, it's important that each team comes away with ideas that they commit to actually looking at and potentially even working on. Because as a product marketing manager, I can suggest lots of different things, but ultimately I might not be in charge of certain roadmaps or, certain resources. And so, saying to maybe the partner success team, here's what we discussed. Here's, 2 things that we determined could be useful. Now, your next step as a team or as a manager is to really figure out how to actually execute upon that, and getting kind of buy-in verbally or in writing, I think, is crucial. So I'll go down now to an example. One takeaway from, I believe, my Q1 win-loss analysis was that our partners on the Headspace for Work side don't always, believe that ROI is numbers based. In fact, what we noticed by quotes was that a lot of folks just use employee feedback as a way to manage and actually measure success of their benefits programs. As I mentioned, this was also supported by a bunch of data from another survey that I had run several months prior. So just having that extra validation with numbers was really helpful. And this was something that the product team looked at and said, wow, okay, well, if we're hearing this, it's been a constant trend. What can we do to really address this? And so they actually took this as a key learning, and in their product roadmap ideation, they slotted in a feature for automating employee surveys via the Headspace for Work platform. So I think this was a really good example of something where it was clear, it wasn't a marketing owned thing. It was really a product owned initiative, and they took it and ran with it because we had kind of clear action items and a very succinct, concrete suggestion from me, and having both the anecdotal evidence plus the hardcore kind of numbers there to back up, led to some good ideation and something that actually made it on the roadmap. And I think as a product marketing manager, that's a big win, is to be able to actually influence the roadmap that you don't own. So I hope this was a useful example to go back to the learnings and show how they can really come to life.
Thank you so much, Libby. These were great. I love the tactics, and I know that our audience is going to love it too. So thanks again.
Thank you, Anne. Good to be here.